I thought that was just a funny ones. No, the first actual react we're gonna do is from Simple History. And yes, it is Canadian in nature. It's Simple History saying, why do Canadians go ballistic during war? So this one I think should be interesting in terms of why did Canadian make the Geneva's top 10 list? So let's find out, shall we?
Why do Canadians go ballistic in war? Ah, Canadians. We all know the stereotype. Nice, friendly, and extremely apologetic. If you're...
Not no more. I hate to say it, but Canadians are not... The Canadians have rejected the stereotype of nice and polite in a big way. Once upon a time they were. It's not that way anymore. The Canadians are honestly no different in that respect to every other modernized Western civilization in the world. They have truly... Are there Canadians that are nice people? Absolutely. Just like there are nice people in America, and there are nice people in France, and there are nice people in Great Britain, and Tabernacle. Thank you for the follow. Like there's nice people at, like, you know, the whole thing is like, oh, that these people will like open their homes. Yes, Leo, thank you. Yeah. Is these people will like open their homes for you, and they will help you out when your car breaks down. That is true, literally everyone. It's that once upon a time there was the stereotype that Canadians were overly nice, and it is not the case any longer. It hasn't been the case for some time, unfortunately. People have gotten angry in the last 10 or so years. And so that the stereotype of the polite Canadians is no more. The most recent circumstance I can think of that does exemplify the whole nice Canadians thing is there was a movie about the attacks in 2001. For the life of me, I can't remember what the name of the movie was called, but it was basically about when the attacks occurred on 9/11. There were the majority of planes landed at this small little airport in Gander, Newfoundland, which is central in Newfoundland, and the entirety of the city, which was not big, mind you, but the entirety of the city of Gander, Newfoundland, basically opened their doors to literally everyone on all of those planes that had to do their emergency landings in Gander. And it was basically just talking about how open the people of Gander were. They just welcomed people into their homes. They fed them. They gave them a place to rest, a place to stay. No, Garrett, that is the stage play. That is the stage play based upon it. They made an actual film about this event. And, you know, it actually had some big names in it. I do know that the actor who played Iceman from the Fox X-Men franchise, he was one of the starring roles of it. And it was like, that was probably the one of the, you know, that was toward that event was sort of towards the tail end of the nice Canadian stereotype. It wasn't too long after those events happened in 2001 that we started to see a hardening of the hearts of Canadians. And while there are still a lot of people in Canada who are good people, kind people, that they will happily help you out whenever you need help, it is not. Unfortunately, Canadians are no longer as a whole, like you cannot call Canada like the nice country anymore. There's just too much shit that's happened in the world. The niceness unfortunately has gone away, I'm afraid. So alas, the stereotype has faded.
Fighting them, though, avoid them at all costs, because for some strange reason, these usually calm maple leaf lovers go absolutely ballistic when there's a war on. Trench raids. In
Here we
World
go.
War I, the only thing scarier than going on a trench raid was to be on the receiving end of a Canadian one. Soon after their deployment, the Canucks earned a fearsome reputation as enthusiastic and innovative practitioners of this brutal art. To maximize
brutal art. Hang on, I missed
going
something
on a
there.
trench raid was to be on the receiving end of a Canadian one. Soon after their deployment, the Canucks earned a fearsome reputation as enthusiastic and innovative practitioners of this brutal art. To maximize stealth, they were known to blacken their faces and to wear thick rubber gloves. They also brought along with them a variety of handmade weapons to optimize their killing effectiveness, such as spiked clubs, knives, and brass knuckles, to allow them to take out enemies silently.
Okay, so the Canadian military back in World War I decided to go all unga bunga. I'm starting to... chat, are you guys starting to see why they decided to make Wolverine such a vicious fighter in the comics? He's only just channeling his Canadian roots. And lately, let's not forget, Logan also fought in World War I. Ooh, what kind of trench wars do you think Logan participated in during World War I?
Alternatively, pipe bombs and grenade catapults were used if they preferred to go in guns blazing. On operation, the Canadians tore through trenches so quickly and with such cold-blooded efficiency that by the end of the war, they were able to reach up to 1 kilometer behind enemy lines. Their speed and ferocity earned them the nicknames from the terrified Germans, ranging from Storm...
Yes! Yes! Thank you, 504. Yes, the film was diverted. Thank you very much. For the life of me, I could not think. So yeah, the film I was just describing about all the planes that head to the emergency landing at Gander is called Diverted. If anybody is interested in seeing it, it's a nice little character piece film. If any of you guys are interested.
And ferocity earned them the nicknames from the terrified Germans, ranging from stormtroopers to wild colonials. The savage determination of the Canadians was most on show in the 4 months leading up to the Battle of Vimy Ridge, where they conducted 55 raids. The most disastrous of these happened in March of 1917, involving over 1,300 soldiers. Despite suffering an appalling 43% casualty rate and being constantly gassed, one group of raiders was able to clear a 450-meter section of the German trench. Killing prisoners of war. When they weren't going on deadly nighttime raids, the Canadians could usually be found slaughtering prisoners of war.
And now we know where the Geneva Convention for treating prisoners of war came from. Yeah. Now we see the first step in why the Geneva Convention exists.
Finally, in World War I, the murder of German POWs was actively encouraged by some commanders. Before the attack on Vimy Ridge, for instance, one soldier recalled how an officer told him, "Remember, no prisoners, they'll just eat your rations." Having to share already limited food supplies was just one of the reasons why most preferred to shoot rather than capture. But the most powerful justifications were revenge and battle rage. In a typical account, one lieutenant will recall how, after losing half of his company to machine gun fire, his surviving men rushed to the battery that had caused the damage to find the Germans inside crying and with their hands up. Unmoved, they proceeded to mercilessly bludgeon and shoot them to death. Another
So basically, the Germans for this battery that mowed down a bunch of the Canadians, as soon as the Canadians showed up, they kind of went,
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
And yes, Adams, I know the Canadians do not have a monopoly on being absolute savages in war. I'm very aware of that.
Miller would relate on one occasion, a German rushed to one of his comrades with a bayonet, but then chickened out and surrendered. In his own words, our boy would have none of it. He lunged at the German again and again, who each time lowered his arms and stopped the point of the bayonet with his bare hands. The German was screaming for mercy. Even if a surrendering German somehow survived his initial encounter with a wild colonial, his life was still in great danger. In this regard, one veteran would remember how he once witnessed one of his fellow Canadians turn a German POW into red mist by dropping a live grenade into his greatcoat pocket.
Ah!
Live and let die. During World War
God
I,
damn!
soldiers carried out an unofficial live and let live policy. This was an unspoken agreement in which both sides agreed to only attack each other if ordered. The most famous example of this in action was the unofficial 1914 Christmas Day truce, in which thousands of combatants from both sides exchanged gifts, sang.
Yeah. Oh man, I remember when we watched the Sabaton video. It was the Sabaton with Yarn Hub, where they did the history of this event of the Christmas truce. And you guys remember, I cried my eyes out when we watched that video. Oh yeah, every time I watch a video about that, just thinking about it, just thinking about the Christmas truce is just just thinking about it tightens up my chest and brings tear to my eyes because it was such a beautiful moment during a time of war, whereas it was a moment of humanity in a completely inhumane moment. And I mean, just thinking about it is, yeah, we also watched I don't think it was the commercial Tesla. It was a video that was put out in Canada. Like some of the commercials that they could put out in Canada are not necessarily commercials for a product, but they're infomercials. They're quick, 1-2 minute little snippet segments of teaching about history. And that was one of them. And it's just every time I see it or think about it, it gets me all choked up because it was such a beautiful moment in a time of absolute strife and destruction. And it's always gets me. Yeah, and the next morning they had to go back to killing each other. And that's the heartbreaking part about Wolfie is they that's the heartbreaking part about it is they shared a moment in that hellscape. They were able to share a moment of peace and happiness and camaraderie with one another. And the next morning, they had to go back to killing each other. So yeah, that always gets me. Always, every time that always gets me. Yes. Oh, Akatora, that's what I was talking about. I did a reaction to the Sabaton version of it. It's if you want to see my reaction to it, which is basically me crying a lot. It's my reaction to the Sabaton version is on my YouTube channel.
Carols and mingled with each other for a few hours. The next year, though, the Canucks were on the front lines, and unlike their allies, live and let live was not in their vocabulary. Among their number were the troops of the 3rd Battalion, who were stationed in the Ypres salient on the Western Front. In the spirit of the previous year, voices from the opposing trench wished them a happy Christmas, and some of the friendlier Canucks returned the greetings. After a couple of minutes, men from both sides had raised their heads above the dugouts, and an older, whiskered man was invitingly waving a box of cigars. Moments later, a Canadian sergeant ruined Christmas by dispatching 2 Germans with his machine gun.
Oh, God.
Of course, this wouldn't be the last time the Germans of the Great War were tricked into a false sense.
Yeah, the Canadians. The Germans, like, hey, we had a celebratory time last year where we had peace and camaraderie and we had a moment. The Canadians just went, fuck this shit, die. Yeah, the Canadians were really bloodthirsty during World War I. They were not there to fuck around, to be sure. Yeah, they did. I'm fully going to acknowledge that the Canadians did spit on that happy moment from the last year. I will fully acknowledge that. It's, well, as I'm probably going to be saying a lot in this video, there's a reason why the Geneva Convention exists. And it's because of the Canadians.
Of security by their heartless North American foe. In one particularly cruel episode, Canuck troops tossed tins of corned
Moose, it was the longest distance kill was done by a Canadian sniper. However, that record has been broken by, I believe it's a Ukrainian sniper broke that record a year or 2 ago, I believe. So for a while it was a Canadian sniper, but that has since been broken by a Ukrainian sniper. Yeah, and now we get to the real part that everybody remembers about the Canadians in war.
In one particularly cruel episode, Canuck troops tossed tins of corned beef into a German trench. Then, when they heard their requests for more, they lobbed grenades at them instead. As the story so far have illustrated, for some reason, Canadians went absolutely bananas in World War I. But why were they so angry? Some historians have argued their ruthlessness was an emotional response to a battlefield rumor about the so-called crucified Canadian, an officer who was supposedly crucified to a barn door near Ypres. Others have speculated their thirst for revenge drew from their traumatic experience at the harrowing 1915 Second Battle of Ypres, during which Canadians took the brunt of the first ever German poison gas attack of the war. The best explanation, however, may be the simple fact that Canadians were brutalized more than any others because they were always being placed in the first wave of attacks.
Hello. And this makes sense. The Canadians basically got treated like cannon fodder. And so the Canadians finally decided to say, fuck this shit. You want to treat us like cannon fodder? Let's fucking go. And they just said, fine, let's game the fuck on. And they said, if we're going to be treated like cannon fodder, then we're going to basically take the gloves off and be utterly fucking ruthless. You know what? You can't blame them for doing that. It's, imagine it, imagine if you're constantly basically being used as basically a biological wall for other troops, continuously being used as a biological wall where your only purpose was to basically eat lead for the people in the back for so long. Yeah, the Canadians are eventually, they're going to be like, fuck this shit. We're done. We're not going to be just like cannon fodder for you. We're going to basically just end the enemy before you can even get to them because we're sick of this shit. Perfectly legit response, in my opinion. Did they go overboard? Yeah, maybe, but it's fucking war. And that's one thing to keep in mind here. This is fucking war. Even with the whole thing about Christmas.
In 2 different times, Canadian burned down the US White House and add that with what happened in World War I, so don't fuck with car. In 2 different times, Canadian burned down the US White House and add that with what happened in World War I, so don't.
Stay, you're repeating yourself. pirate, but yes, it's the yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's just you fuck around, you're gonna find out. And especially, like, we also have to remember, this is times of war. That's another thing to remember, is it's all well and good for people not in war to sit back, nice and safe and cozy in their homes, and say, oh, you shouldn't do this when it's soldiers at war. It's all well and dandy for the people safe and protected by these men and women going to war and saying, oh, you shouldn't do that. That's me. Or that, that's you can't be doing that because because it hurts my sensibilities. Motherfucker, these people are at war. These soldiers are at war, and war is ugly. It is really fucking ugly. We've heard the stories from World War I to World War II to Desert Storm to the Great Surge in Iraq. War is ugly as hell. And people that have never experienced it have no fucking idea what actually happens in war. They do not see the horrors that soldiers see. This is why you have soldiers coming back from war and experiencing such significant PTSD. It's why you have soldiers coming back from war with such severe health issues, like the ones that were exposed to mustard gas in World War II, and why you have soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan that are suffering health problems because of the burn pits. Is because these men and women go through literal hell. And the one thing that they are trying to do is fucking survive. And it's survive literally by any means. When you are in the heat of a firefight in war, all you want to do is live. Yes, in Agent Orange. I kind of skipped around a couple of conflicts, Annex. I was summarizing. Like, all you want to do is survive and live and get back to see your family while also completing your mission. And that's what people sitting at home cozy in front of their fireplaces or sitting cozy in front of their TVs or radios, depending upon the era, don't understand and what they refuse to understand. That's why you had the hippies that were making the lives of the Vietnam veterans absolutely hell. That's why you have people like Hassan and Frogan and Denims that are making the lives of modern soldiers absolute hell because they're sitting comfortably in their $1,000 million mansions just talking about shit that they do not have a fucking clue about and refusing to listen to people that were actually fucking there and the absolute nightmares that they were forced to go through on a daily basis. That's why you have soldiers like the Canadians in World War I that went absolutely fucking beast mode on the German army because of what the German army was fully prepared to do to them. It's why you had the Allied troops in World War II that would go absolutely, they would have especially the, who was it? Was it the 442? That did the attack on Japan, where the standing order is if you see a body, stab it to make sure it's dead, because the Japanese army would routinely fake being dead so they can jump up and attack from behind, because war is hell. You can pull all the Geneva Convention shit you want. It doesn't matter when you are in the fucking thick of it. When all you're trying to do is survive and make the bad guys stop trying to kill you. In the end, that's what it's all about. And the Canadians did that in World War I. That's what the Canadians did. They were in a war. They treated it like a war. They weren't there on fucking vacation. They were there to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and they ran out of bubblegum a long fucking time ago. And yeah, what they did sounds heinous as hell, like with the thing at Christmas, and what they did with food, but you know what? They beat the enemy. their actions in wartime defeated their enemies. And because of that, you and I are allotted the freedoms that we have to do as we wish in the modern day because of that viciousness and that ferocity. You can say you don't like it as much as you want, but you are reaping the spoils of that viciousness and ferocity that they had. You are able to do so because of it. Don't forget about that.
Beach. By the close of the Great War, the Canadians had gone from a relatively unknown fighting force to one of the planet's most feared and respected military outfits. It was with this hard-earned reputation that they would enter the killing fields of World War II to face off against a German army reinforced by elite units with a strangely familiar name, Stormtroopers. On June 6, 1944, the Canadians reminded everyone of their elite status when they pulled off what's considered one of the most tactically successful operations of D-Day. Their objective was to storm Juno Beach and then seize the cities of Caen and Bayeux with 14,000 soldiers and 1,000 paratroopers. During the first wave, 3,000 lion-hearted Canadians rushed towards German pillboxes, taking heavy casualties. They were then followed in by tanks, which obliterated most of the German beach defenses, allowing infantrymen to swarm in and begin close-quarters fighting. Impressively, it took them less than 2 hours to secure their first route off the beach at the small town of Courcelles. By the end of the day, Courcelles-sur-Mer, Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer, and Colombier-sur-Soleil had all fallen, and the tank regiment of the 1st Hussars were at the Caen-Bayeux highway intersection, making them the only Allied unit on D-Day to actually reach their final objective.
Oh, you don't hear about that, do you? How many times in history lessons have you been taught that it was the Canadians that were the only ones to hit their D-Day objective? Only once. Because they hit so fucking hard and so fast. Yeah, how many of you knew about this? We hear about the American forces, which, you know, we hear about the other Allied forces like the Americans. We don't hear about this, do we? Because they fucking pushed and they kicked ass. The other beaches may have gone relatively well, yes. But again, they were the only ones to achieve their actual objective that was set out. And they tore through 3 different towns to do it. This is not like they didn't have any resistance. It's not like they just went up and they didn't have any resistance, so they were able to cakewalk right up to it. No, they fought through 3 German-laden towns to get to it, and they still did it.
The Devils Brigade. In World War II, the Canadians distinguished themselves not only as dependable infantrymen, but also as skilled commandos in a joint American-Canadian unit called the 1st Special Service Force, better known as the Devils Brigade, or the Black Devils. The Devils Brigade was formed in June 1942 and had only accepted individuals into its ranks who were already well acquainted with survival and the outdoors. As a result, former skiers, parachutists, hunters, lumberjacks, trappers, and game wardens made up the majority of its personnel. These hard and rugged men were transformed into killing machines via a brutal training regime that involved 100-mile speed marches and specialist training with all sorts of weapons, explosives, and vehicles. To strike fear into their enemies' hearts on the battlefield, they placed a calling card on the dead, emblazoned with the phrase, "The worst is yet to come," in German. The Black Devils were assigned the most...
Oh! And that shit is what we like to call psychological warfare. That is one way to fuck with your enemy. Because psychological warfare is criminally underrated when it comes to combat like this in war. Can you imagine the German German battle group coming across this dead unit absolutely massacred with this calling card saying the worst is yet to come. And like and just like slaughtering an entire unit. Yeah, psyops is an incredibly valuable tool on the battlefield because it can cause desertions. Excuse me. It can cause desertions. It can cause fear when engaging the enemy. And fear can cause poor aim, poor decision-making skills, slower movement times. Oh my God, excuse me. You get like slower reaction times. Fear is an outstanding tool in war that is not frequently used.
Worst is yet to come in German. The Black Devils were assigned the most dangerous assignments, with one of their most iconic missions taking place in December of 1943 at the mountain peak of Monte la Defensa, southeast of Rome. For about a month, multiple British, Canadian, and American assaults attempting to dislodge the Germans at the top had been wiped out one after the other. By the time the Devils Brigade arrived on the scene, Monte la Defensa had been battered with over 200,000 shells, earning it the nickname the Milliondoll Hill. At 1:30 a.m. on December 3rd, carrying 60-pound rucksacks as well as knives, guns, and bayonets, and with charcoal-blackened faces, 600 men of the 1st Special Service Force began climbing up the near-vertical cliff face as fog and swirling snow enveloped the mountain. A little before 6 a.m., they reached the summit and began quietly slitting the throats of sentries. Then, all of a sudden, a rock slide gave away their position and the enemy opened fire. The fighting was intense and both sides suffered heavy losses, but the battle-hardened Germans were eventually expelled. In a mere 2 hours, the month-long standoff had been ended by a force that was 10 times smaller than the combined Allied force that had up until then failed to take Monte la Defensa.
Okay, that's something to take note of. And I know that this video is about Canadians, but this was not just Canadians. This would make for a great Nick video to talk about the Devils Brigade. This would be, because this was Canadian, British, and American combined. It was a joint task force that what the Allied forces could not accomplish, these guys did in 2 fucking hours. In 2 fucking hours, they took this hill that no one else could take. Considering some of the... I have no doubt he'd find a protagonist for it, Revan. No doubt whatsoever. Well, I already suggested one Zeb. I don't know if I don't know if it'd be good to suggest now, but maybe I will. Maybe I will. This would make... I could see Nick having a lot of fun talking about the Devils Brigade. And yes, I have no doubt he'd be able to find a couple of protagonists to highlight during their operations in World War II.
With a little help from the Americans, they had shown that once again, that to mess with a Canadian in wartime is to sign your own death warrant.
Ew. That was interesting. A little bit of fascinating history about what happens when you fuck with the Canadians during war. Eek.